Starting right now, The Rita Panahi Show.
Good evening and welcome to the Rita Panahi Show. Coming up tonight, Climate Change Minister Chris Bowen under pressure over the performance of Labor's secretive capacity investment scheme. Daniel Wild will join me to cover the day's top headlines. The Logies were on last night celebrating mediocrity and leftist self-indulgence. Sylv Costello will be here to unpack that. Josh Hammer will have the latest from the US, including revelations that ABC News were directed by Anthony Fauci to silence an investigation into the origins of COVID. And Sophie Cunningham's star is on the rise. Kinsey Schofield will have all your royal and entertainment news. And Left is Losing, it features this New York politician who endorses stealing as long as you need whatever it is that you're stealing.
People who are stealing things like, soap. And that means if you're stealing those things, you need them.
But first, the ABC is relaunching its US politics show, and first guest will be Hassan Piker. This is a man who, when given a choice between Hamas and Israel, said he would vote for Hamas every time. Speaking about October 7, he said, "It doesn't matter if rapes happened on October 7. It doesn't change the dynamic for me." And of course, he says that American soldiers deserve to be maimed and that America deserved 9/11.
Mujahideen, a brave fucking soldier, f***ed his eye hole with their Isn't that how he lost his fucking dumbass eye? Because he got his fucking eye hole f***ed? America deserved 9/11, dude. F*** it. I'm saying it.
And the man the ABC are platforming also said this not too long ago.
Kill them. Kill those motherfuckers and murder those motherfuckers in the street. Let the streets soak in their fucking red capitalist bloods, dude.
Charming. Joining me now is Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, Daniel Wild. Dan, just a reminder that the ABC gets more than $1.2 billion of our money every single year.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And of course, this comes on the back of the Gina Reinhart skit, which they were forced to apologise for and backtrack on, although in a very mealy-mouthed sort of way. And I think it just shows that they are a law unto themselves, aren't they? You know, they have a charter of responsibility. They're supposed to be impartial because, as you said, they are receiving taxpayer funds. But where is the government on this? You know, where is the Prime Minister? Where is the Communications Minister on this? Because at some point, the buck stops with them. Ultimately, the ABC is subject to those charters that I mentioned. The Communications Minister can reel them in. And of course, the government can threaten their funding if they're not adhering to their charter responsibility. So, you know, I think this must be a line in the sand. And the question for Anthony Albanese is, does he agree with the statements of this individual or not? Does his government agree that they choose Hamas over Israel? Is that what they think? If not, then they need to do something about it.
Dan, the sad reality is that given the ABC's reporting on the Trump administration and US politics in general, a lot of their audience may be on board with what this character has to say.
Well, I suspect there's some of that. And I think there's two other things. One is they know it'll create controversy. I mean, I don't think anyone watches this program, or probably no one's heard of it. So if they do this, then people have heard of it. They get a few more ratings out of it. And I think the other thing is, look, they're really just rubbing the noses of Australians in it now, because what they're showing is that they can do whatever they want. You know, they can have whoever they want on, they can say whatever they want to say, and there's nothing you can do about it. You know, they'll put out an apology a month later. Oh, you know, it didn't meet our editorial standards and so forth. But, you know, this is to show Australians that they can do whatever they want, that the government will do nothing about it, and you've got to pay for it, and too bad.
Now, students skipped school and took to the streets on Friday to protest One Nation and Pauline Hanson. Let's have a quick look at some of the young'uns.
What would you do if Pauline Hanson were here today?
I'm not. I would shoot her. I would hit her. I would run and hit her. Beat her up. Kill her.
She shouldn't be here. She's a racist, sexist bigot, and she doesn't help any of us in any way. She's not for the people. She's for the billionaires, the pedophiles, and all the old men in politics.
To stand up for what's right and show what kids want. And what is that? What do kids want? Freedom and more diversity.
Protesting for what's right and
like, what's wrong with what she's doing. Just how she acts and stuff. Like, as my sign says, she is racist, sexist, and a Nazi. And just no one really wants her as a president. Or not president, like, minister?
Dan, you can blame the schools, you can blame the culture, but you also have to look at the parents in many of these cases. And among the most disturbing things I saw online, not necessarily what we played there, was the number of young people calling for political violence. The videos are out there. There's sadly a lot of them. But young Australian kids, mainly females, advocating for murder or physical harm to be incited against Pauline Hanson.
Well, I think those that are doing that, they need to have a knock on the door from the cops, and their parents need to have a talking to, because you're not allowed to do that in this country. I don't know if they know that, but having violence against other people is something we don't have in this country, unlike a lot of other countries around the world, but I assume they're not told that at whatever school they're going to. But I love it, you know, it just shows the ignorance. She's going to be president, minister. Look, I don't know. It's all a bit too hard for them. So, look, you know, I mean, they need to be responsible for what they say, but I also feel sorry for them because really there's just some kind of corrupt software program operating in their brain that they've been told by people, whether it's at schools or elsewhere on social media, they've picked up this nonsense, and they're just a mouthpiece for an unwitting ideology that they don't really understand or comprehend. So that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be held to account for what they're saying, but I guess overall, I don't know how old they are, 15 or 16, I just feel sorry for the fact that our country has let them down so badly by having a school system that puts this into their brain and then says it's okay to go out there and protest while, you know, there's many other productive things they could be doing. So, yeah, I feel sorry for them.
Now, figures released by the Australian Bureau of Statistics reveal a slump in new loan commitments across owner-occupier, investor and first home buyer categories, Dan. That's the incredible bit of news there. In a speech at a Nationals conference in Canberra on Saturday, Leader Matt Canavan accused Labor of destroying the property market and vowed to scrap Labor's tax changes. Dan, this really is further evidence that the budget measures, the tax hikes are having a devastating impact for property owners, on the property market. To have a reduction in home loans for first home buyers, though, is astounding because we were told the entire reason they're doing this is to assist first home buyers, but loans are down for that category.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's the most concerning thing. I don't quite understand why they'd be down for that category. I mean, if prices are coming down, as they are in every capital city now, I would assume that loans will be going up rather than coming down. So there's something else going on, obviously. I think when we go back to the government's budget, what was always clear is they never really knew what it was they were trying to achieve, or they never were willing to communicate it. I mean, you'll remember the budget itself outlined a pretty modest increase in the number of home buyers as a result of their policy changes and a pretty modest change to house prices. I mean, they did sort of say house prices would moderate in their growth, but not that house prices would actually start coming down in absolute terms. So I think if you go back and look at those budget papers, I don't know whether they deliberately, you know, put in information that was false or they just didn't get it. I mean, did they just not understand that if you do this kind of stuff, that prices will come down? But, you know, the evidence is in and we know what's happened. So I think compare what they said in the budget to what's happened, and it's pretty interesting reading.
Absolutely, but it was entirely predictable, Dan. This shouldn't be a shock. It's almost not even an unintended consequence because anyone with a functioning brain, anyone with any appreciation of economics or even history would tell you this is what was going to happen. We discussed it at length on this station, but we saw it when they did this previously and they had to reverse course because it had such a dramatic impact on rents. We've seen New Zealand do it more recently, and again, they've done a 180. So I don't know why they thought this time around it would be any different. Now, let's talk about climate change and Energy Minister Chris Bowen. He's under pressure over the performance of Labor's secretive capacity investment scheme. The government's refusing to divulge CIS pricing data or assumed returns for taxpayers. Opposition energy spokesman Dan Tehan said the lack of transparency around this scheme is a national disgrace. Dan, it seems pretty obvious this scheme is being used to prop up renewables. It's being used to prop up renewable projects across the country.
Yeah, and a lot of those are foreign-owned as well. I mean, I'd love to see the funding of this going straight to foreign-owned companies. I mean, we did some research on this a while ago, finding that the vast majority of the major wind companies are foreign-owned. So I'd imagine that if they're eligible for this scheme, that they're getting some of that taxpayer money as well. The whole thing is a rort, really. I mean, it's always just been one big boondoggle to use other people's money to subsidise an industry that would never be able to survive on its own. Meanwhile, it's giving us higher prices, a less reliable energy system as well. And, you know, what's interesting to me is when you look at Chris Bowen's latest address to the National Press Club a couple of weeks ago, he didn't even mention the words net zero once in his speech. So he's sort of running away from the idea of net zero because we know that net zero is dead, and he's still pushing out these schemes because they know it's, you know, it's unpopular. And that's why he said it's secretive. You know, they don't want to tell people because they're losing money hand over fist, giving it away to foreign companies in exchange for an inferior, more costly energy system. I mean, this has got to be one of the dumbest things I've ever seen.
And he'll tell you how popular these schemes are because, well, people are taking up batteries and solar panels. It doesn't mention the fact that they're heavily subsidised by the taxpayer and all that market interference that's going on. Now, before you go, Anthony Albanese has entered a political danger zone with his popularity hitting rock bottom. But last week he did pass Paul Keating to become Labor's fourth longest running Prime Minister. Jeff Chambers, writing in the Australian newspaper, said that Labor MPs remain upbeat about the Prime Minister because the thinking is that as long as the Conservative side of politics is a mess, Albanese and the ALP can win the next election. He added, Labor MPs are hoping voters will give them credit for tackling housing affordability in a way no other government had the courage to address. Well, Dan, I don't know if that's just wishful thinking because they seem to be causing havoc in the housing market. I don't know if that's solving the housing crisis or not.
Well, I think what's probably going to happen is they're going to get pretty arrogant over the next year. Yeah, I mean, yes, it's true that if we go to the next election and the Liberal Party's on a 17 primary vote and One Nation's on 20-something, then Labor's going to win by a whole bunch. I mean, that's obvious. But there's a lot of water to go under the bridge between now and then. And I think what you're going to see is a very arrogant government, a lot of very relaxed ministers and backbenchers that aren't taking their domestic constituencies all that seriously because I think they're going to win no matter what. So, you know, I think what you might start to see is the conditions brewing for a bit of an upset at the next election if this continues to go. I mean, certainly Australians don't like being taken for granted. And if they start to get a whiff that they're being taken for granted by the Prime Minister, who's sort of taking it easy because he thinks he can just fall over the line, then there will be repercussions for that. But obviously a necessary condition for that to take place is for the centre-right of politics to, you know, whether it's through preferencing, whether it's through more of a formal coalition arrangement, to actually become the new anti-Labor bloc to oust the government. In the absence of that, it'll be difficult.
Absolutely. If the centre-right parties get their act together and actually have some sort of a formal arrangement, whether it's some loose coalition or preference deal, something that's targeted towards defeating Labor rather than destroying each other. Dan Weil, thank you so much for your time. Now, the Logies were on last night, which meant we were treated to another night of mediocrity and self-indulgence from the left. Let's start with Robert Irwin mocking Karl Stefanovic.
Unfortunately, Karl Stefanovic didn't RSVP tonight, which means we didn't have to hire quite as many bartenders, but we've kept him a spare seat, just in case. It's over there to the right, the far right.
Karl Stefanovic is about as far right as I am blonde, but never mind that. Here is Rob Irwin having a little dig at Dave Hughes because Dave's dared to stray from the leftist reservation.
Apparently, I hear that Channel 10 is also developing a reboot of Hughesy, We Have a Problem. And I think it's called, no, seriously, Hughesy, We Have a Problem.
And here is supposed comic and corporate spruiker Shane Jacobson deciding his inability to open an envelope was a fine time to kick Pauline Hanson.
Oh, God, if Pauline Hanson's mouth was this hard to open, wouldn't the world be a better place? All right.
Pathetic and about as funny as an ingrown toenail. Joining me now is senior reporter at the Herald Sun, Seb Costello, also a man with considerable TV experience. So be honest with me, did you even know the Logies were right? I found out last night whilst they were in progress because I was out for dinner and I was wondering why a particular person wasn't there and they had to be at the Logies against their wishes.
Rita, what are you talking about? I was counting down the days. I'm already getting ready for next year's event. This is a big deal. No, I wasn't aware they were on until I flicked on my social media. But if I had tuned in, I reckon I would have doubled their television audience. So, yeah. In fact, we had our Herald Sun Monthly Office Awards last week for the month of July. And I reckon there was probably more engagement with that audience for those awards than TV viewers for the Logies.
That should be televised. Now, should they be put out of their misery, really? It's got sad. We used to always poke fun at the Logies, but they had a little bit of value at least. They were funny. There would be always moments from the Logies that you talk about the next day. These days, they're just lame and sad and pathetic. I feel bad mocking it because it's so bad. You know what I mean? It's punching down. I'm punching down, Seb. Let's just kill it.
I know what you're saying. I took this assignment very seriously, so I watched the first segment on behalf of your program.
Took one for the team.
I did. Robert Irwin was the host, which was a good choice because I think they need someone with experience dealing with absolute reptiles in that particular room. So I'm glad they had Bob Irwin. I thought Casey Donovan sang nicely at the beginning. She always gets people up and about. I
love that you are looking for positives.
I'm trying to be positive. I mean, yeah, I think... you know, it's a room full of people that don't like each other. And I think it's best summed up by, I once heard a story that when James Packer sold out of the Nine Network, he said, I'm leaving free-to-air television to focus on casinos so I can deal with a higher calibre of person. And I reckon that sums up the Logies.
That is a great line. I want to like it because I love entertainment. Every night here I've got an entertainment segment because we love... keeping up with what's happening in that world, but this, no one's interested. No, and this is probably the most anyone's going to talk about the Logies today. So let's move on to more important things. I've been eager to talk to you about this story. Well, you've done a series of exclusive stories for the Herald Sun about accused fraudster Cy Nguyen, who is nicknamed the Wolf of Whiteman Street. Now, after a 3-year investigation by Victoria Police, they have charged him with 309 counts of obtaining financial advantage by deception. This man lived an astonishing lifestyle, Seb. Tell my audience about his life, his lifestyle, and the very powerful and influential, that's the same thing, powerful and famous people that he rubbed shoulders with through those years.
Yeah, well, it might sound pretty good to a few of the viewers. The lifestyle was celebrities, it was glitzy events.
Football stars.
So we understand VIP sex parties in a villa at Crown Casino. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. There's just the little issue of the $10 million fraud that Victoria Police now allege against Mr Nguyen. They say that over a number of years, he ripped off a charity that actually employed him, a disability charity called Genu down in Geelong, who say they've been through their books and they found millions of dollars worth of equipment that was paid for by Genu. They say it was authorised by Yang Nguyen and they have no record of the equipment ever arriving. So how did that happen? Where did that money go? But you mentioned the connections. And I have not seen a story like this in terms of the fault lines that it runs everywhere in Melbourne. You're talking about footballers, Brownlow medalists, particularly the Geelong Footy Club.
Yeah, he was a massive Geelong fan, wasn't he?
Massive Cats fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You see him at Gary Ablett Jr.'s Bucks party. He organised the Bucks party. He shows up at the 2022 Grand Final or Premiership celebrations for Geelong. So he's everywhere. And he also shared some of his money with the Cats as a financial sponsor. Just where did all that money come from?
Is the AFL looking into this at all? But if the case there was there any financial cap, salary cap breaches, whether there was any wrongdoing in the way they did the finances? Do we know if the AFL is having their ironically named Integrity Unit having a look at this?
Yeah, well, not to be confused with the Integrity Unit podcast, which Mick Warner from the Herald Sun and I publish on a close to weekly basis. But yeah, I mean, when Essendon had somebody who had done serious jail time hanging around their dressing rooms, it became an issue for the AFL's Integrity Unit. Yeah. You know, this guy is accused of a $10 million fraud. The charity says it's actually more. He knew players intimately, phone records obtained by the Herald Sun show he made 110 phone calls to Cats players and officials during the successful 2022 final series.
Wow.
And you know, it's not easy to get a football player or official who's playing in the grand final on the line in grand final week.
In grand final week in particular, absolutely. But then if you've got a permanent villa at Crown Casino, I don't know how much they are a night, it's not cheap, then that gets you some connections. Before you go, quickly, AFL comms boss and former Labor operative Sharon McCrohan has just hired Anthony Albanese's former speechwriter James Newton. Seb, the links between the AFL and the ALP are growing.
It sometimes looks like the AFL and the Victorian ALP is just an epic love story. You know, there's just so much in common. They share a social agenda. They're always doing events together. And look, James Newton here, Albo's former speechwriter, did work at Cricket Australia, so he's got some sporting background. But yeah, I mean, the optics as we head into a election year in Victoria where maybe the government will change to have, you know, the AFL led by two comms unit led by two former ALP staffers is a lot. I mean, you know, Sharon McCrohan's had an interesting few years. She's running comms for the AFL. Her former client list is the Victorian Labor Party, the Victorian branch of the CFMEU, and Luke Sayers.
Oh, wow, yes. And that Luke Sayers connection may come back to haunt the AFL. And we'll be talking about that, I'm sure, on this program.
Sayers v Sayers, set for November in the Supreme Court.
You know, I want to take the week off just so I can go watch it.
You and me both.
Just for my own amusement, not even for professional purposes. Yep. Seb Costello, always a pleasure.
Great to be here.
Coming up, lefties losing it, plus revelations that ABC News were directed by Anthony Fauci to silence an investigation into the origins of COVID. Josh Hammer is next. You're watching the Rita Panahi Show, and it's time for Lefties Losing It. Let's start in the Badlands of New York City, where the commies have taken over, and they have dreams of turning one of the world's great cities into the sort of hellhole where criminals roam free.
Advocates believe that shoplifting or bringing bags of trash onto the trains or sleeping in the subway should not be criminally prosecuted. Neither should graffiti vandalism and public urination.
Most of what we saw were crimes of poverty. People who were stealing things like toothpaste, people who were stealing things like, soap. And that means if you're stealing those things, you need them.
That was a New York Assemblywoman, Emily Gallagher, saying that if you're stealing soap, then you probably need it, so why not steal it? You know what? I need myself a mini Kelly, Emily. I may just wander into a Hermes store in New York City and take one home. Don't send the cops. Now to everyone's favourite communist, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is suddenly very concerned about her privacy.
Are you and Riley Roberts still together?
I don't comment on my private life, but thank you.
Your mother once said she loves Riley and wants to see you guys get married. Is she going to get her wish?
Again, I don't comment on my private life, but thank you.
Now, I would normally have some sympathy for that position, but wasn't it just last week the AOC was taking us on her egg freezing journey? You can't open the door that wide to your private life, even your medical procedures, and then expect people to respect your privacy. Like most radicals of the left, AOC is full of contradictions, full of double standards and delusions, like this one about conservative men.
They hate me because they ain't me and they can't ever be me.
Okay, AOC, God help America if she ever cheats her way into the White House. Now, former ABC News correspondent Terry Moran is spilling the beans about his old network and how they silenced his reporting into the origins of the COVID virus. And he suspects that Anthony Fauci had a lot to do with his investigation being heavily altered before broadcast.
Early in 2021, maybe January, February, I'm seeing online and elsewhere people that I thought were smart and serious. Maybe this leaked from the lab. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So I went to Nightline. I said, hey, I'd like to do a story on, and they were like, great, yeah, let's do it. So we just across the board, we talked to, molecular virologists. We talked to people in the Trump administration who had been in the Trump administration, who broke a little news that that lab had been funded by the Chinese military, and the day that it's supposed to air, it gets reviewed and it comes back to me, and it is incomprehensible. And I'd never been angrier. I'm in the booth.
These lawyers?
Lawyer standards, and I was told, Fauci.
Oh.
Now, it's curious that he's telling us this now, some 5 years later. Perhaps he should have said something at the time. At the very least, he could have called out Anthony Fauci for his interference, the sinister silencing of not just scientific dissent, but journalistic dissent. But no, to this day, Terry Moran, being the good little obedient leftist that he is, he defends Fauci and says he's being demonised. Well, if he's being demonised, it's by his own words and actions, as we've covered in depth on this program. The Fauci diaries, the Fauci emails and text messages, and his disgraceful performance at a Senate hearing when he pled the fifth 111 times. But back to Terry Moran, and here he nails why his network and the media in general have been so terrible in their attempts to report anything Trump-related.
Is ABC News a liberal institution?
Yes, but I think like a lot of mainstream media, it's because of lack of viewpoint diversity. That was one of the problems in covering Trump. Nobody had voted for him.
Nobody voted for him? Nobody voted for the man who won in a landslide? Of course, he meant nobody voted for him who works in a newsroom, the writers, producers, presenters. No, that echo chamber is sealed tight.
Because I sent out these, hey, we should be fair to Trump internal emails, I heard from people, engineers, maybe the occasional producer, who said, thank you. Yeah, attaboy.
Underrated story in all television networks is that the people who are not on-air talent and who are not producers have different politics.
Yes, they have different politics. They have viewpoint diversity, but not among the ABC elite. And the same, sadly, is true for NBC, CNN, MS Now, etc., etc. Joining me now is Newsweek's senior editor-at-large, Josh Hammer. Josh, what did you learn from that interview with Terry Moran?
Rita, unfortunately, this whole interview to me was something of a throwback to an era that thankfully is bygone. It was an era that was marked by biomedical tyranny. It was also marked by the forceful imposition of homogenous groupthink unto the masses, and they utilize things like the big tech platforms as a cudgel to achieve the forceful imposition of that groupthink. So in other words, what I'm really trying to say here is that when I hear Tim Moran saying that his bosses at ABC News were censoring the possibility, now we know the actual fact that the virus came from the Wuhan lab, what this means to me is that ABC News was not trying to get penalized. They were not trying to get penalized by the powers that be in the censorship apparatus, namely in the Biden administration above all. We saw a lot of this over the course of the Hunter Biden laptop against the press. Really, all of our big tech woes circa 2021, 2022, all of this came down to basically two things. The whole censorship apparatus boiled down to the Hunter Biden Russian disinformation hoax and COVID-19. COVID-19 was something that the Biden administration was telling Mark Zuckerberg. They were telling Jack Dorsey and the Austrian regime at Twitter. They were telling all the folks at Google, saying, make sure that you ban people who are saying maybe you actually shouldn't get the third or fourth booster shot. You should actually nuke accounts that are questioning the efficacy of K95 masks. This was a time of moral panic, Rita. It was a time of hysteria. And unfortunately, what I learned from this interview was that it wasn't just the big tech platforms, but the same mentality creeped into the very newsrooms of CBS, ABC, NBC, etc.
It was so evident across the Western world. It was quite disturbing, disgusting, with the exception of Sweden. Sweden seemed to be the lone example, other than states like Florida and Texas, where you had brave governors taking a stand. But the rest of the world, including us here in Australia, I remember writing about COVID pretty much every day, talking about it on this station. And the heat you got, not just from politicians and the left, but from your colleagues, the colleagues who wanted you to be silenced for, like you said, questioning the wisdom of wearing masks at the beach outside, or vaccinating children who had very little risk from COVID, and we knew that from very early on. Now, despite all this, despite the fact that his own investigation into the origins of COVID was pretty much cut up. He said he was so disgusted by it, he hasn't watched it to this day. And Fauci had a hand in that, as far as he knows, and yet he still defends Anthony Fauci, Josh. This is what I cannot understand, even after everything we have learnt in the last month. The fact that he should be condemned by his own words in those diaries. You've got Moran still saying, oh, no, he's being unfairly demonised.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Sweden because it's actually a Swedish analogy that comes to mind here. This seems to me to be a bit a case of Stockholm syndrome, if you will, frankly.
Yes, very good.
From Terry Moran. Listen, Terry Moran is a man who I do not actually personally know. I've never met him. I've seen some of his stuff on social media over the years. He strikes me, Rita, just my impression, that he is something of a liberal of a bygone era. That is a man whose politics or of by and for the left. But when I say up by and for the left, I mean kind of the old school Bill Clinton, Alan Dershowitz left. In other words, a version of the American left that in America has been totally left behind by this new crop of hegemonic groupthink, progressive, borderline these days, DSA, communist, etc. So I think Terry Moran is a liberal who is nonetheless probably an intellectually honest, or at least intellectually honest adjacent liberal, but he's having a hard time, I think, trying to square that openness, intellectual honesty with his left-wing politics, which is why he finds himself at this point probably just rushing to Fauci's defense because he sees the Republicans are ganging up on Fauci. So he sees Rand Paul interrogating Fauci quite correctly, vigorously from the Senate dais. He sees Ron DeSantis calling Anthony Fauci a little elf who should be tossed into the Potomac River. And I think Tim Moran is saying, you know what? Okay, I remember who I am. I'm a liberal. I'm a lefty. Therefore, I'm going to come out and defend this guy Fauci. That's my guess as what's going on here. But as I said, it strikes me really as kind of a canonical case of Stockholm syndrome, to be candid.
Yeah, and I think you also nailed it with he's looking at who's attacking Fauci and he can't bear to stand with them. So he's got to just, hold his nose and stand by the man. And it's fascinating because he was really let go from ABC News for those social media posts slamming the Trump administration. And yet ABC News staffers have told Fox News that he would also clash internally with the leftist colleagues he had there. So he was fighting battles on all fronts. Now, Josh filed this one under regrets. This lady's had a few. Have a look at this piece written by Kate Mulvey saying, she regrets drifting from my oldest friends. At 64, I'm lonely, she writes. And I have a lot of sympathy for someone in that position, except this is the same Kate Mulvey who wrote in 2021 why I'm disinviting my unvaccinated friends from my dinner parties. If you won't have the vaccine, you're no friend of mine, she wrote. Josh, actions meet consequences.
Yeah, I mean, I probably shouldn't be laughing, but it's frankly very hard not to laugh at this, right? I mean, this is someone who put her politics on a pedestal, who put her moral superciliousness on a pedestal, who said at the height of COVID that she didn't want to be in the same room, in the same vicinity, in the same 10-mile radius as anyone who had any skepticism, any qualms about the masking or the jabs. And now she's just complaining that she's all shriveled up, all lonely and old maid with nary a person at her side. It's really quite tragic, but it's tragic comic. Look, I'm not going to be shedding any tears, to be honest with you, for Miss Mulvey. Now, this should be contrasted with an actual loneliness epidemic that's going on. It's actually quite terrible here in the United States. All the polls in particular show that young men, above all, describe themselves as having shockingly few real-life friends. So that is where my attention span is going, Rita. There's a real crisis brewing when it comes to the hyper-online generations, millennials, Gen Z. There's all sorts of massive structural problems happening in the Western world on that front. But that is very different than, a 60, 70-something, however old she is, Kate Mulvey, someone who decides to get all holier than thou on the issue of masking and vaxxing, and now she's all the lonelier for it. So frankly, I don't really give a darn about Kate Mulvey, if she's sad, I guess that's her loss. But frankly, her foregone friends, I think, are probably better off without her, to be candid.
We do have to have that discussion at some point about the younger generations and their inability to connect with each other in person. They are so hyper online. They have so much stimulation and constant contact, online contact, but then there's also this contrast where they are feeling completely alone. They don't feel connected in the ways that previous generations have. It is a fascinating topic, and we will discuss it soon, Josh. But I want to ask you about a piece you wrote for the New York Post on anti-Israel politicians. We're seeing a lot of them at the moment, mainly from the Democrats. There's some on the right as well. And you're saying they're ignoring the real foreign threats to US politics. Tell me about that.
Yeah, sure. So the rise of this guy Abdul Said in Michigan, Rita, I think really shines a spotlight on a broader problem, which is the infiltration of radical Islamic elements into the American body politic. So Abdul Sayed's father-in-law is a man who is on the board of the Michigan chapter of CARE, the Council of American Islamic Relations. CARE was founded in the United States as essentially a Hamas Muslim Brotherhood front group. They were actually banned by the UAE in 2014 as a terrorist organization. They've been banned by Texas under Greg Abbott and Florida under Ron DeSantis for being a terrorist organization. CARE nonetheless raised $115,000 through their individuals for Abdul Sayed. The same father-in-law who actually donated $200,000 to Abdul Sayed for a somewhat seedy super PAC known as American Priorities PAC. He also was a founding member of an organization in America called ISNA, the Islamic Society for North America. Both ISNA and CARE, I think it's worth pointing out, were actually unindicted co-conspirators. They were named by a federal judge as unindicted co-conspirators in the largest terror financing case in the history of the United States at the time, the 2008 Holy Land Foundation bust out of Texas. So I'm dropping a lot of names here. The point is, there are radical elements operating American politics who have allegiances, who have financial connections to Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, the Iranian regime. And to me, Rita, this is a big problem because these are actors, these are individuals, these are organizations, these are nation states that want to subvert America, want to end America, but so often our very dumb discourse, typically on the left, is obsessed with the boogeyman of AIPAC, which frankly, there's a lot to say about AIPAC. It's actually not even a particularly effective lobby in many ways. We actually learned that back in 2015 when they failed to stop Barack Obama's nuclear deal. So this notion that AIPAC is this massive grill in the room, I think, is actually just belied by the facts. But even more relevant, they're not the problem. The problem is radical Islam in American politics. Abdul Said, I think, encapsulates that point.
He does, and it seems amongst the socialist, communist faction of the Democrats, anything goes. They seem to have a very high tolerance for individuals, candidates with Islamist links and even Islamist belief systems. How is that going to be countered by the mainstream Democrats? How are they going to stop this faction of the party gaining a greater foothold? Because that seems to be the faction that's setting the agenda in many ways at the moment.
Well, they're not going to, Rita. They're rolling over. Their apps are rolling over. They're taking it. I mean, The big talking point in the Democrat Party right now, Rita, is the big tent. I actually played a montage on my show on Friday. The big tent. We're the big tent. It's Tim Kaine, Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer. It's all the same dumb talking points. We're a big tent. Capitalism, socialism. Let's hash it out. So the talking point has gone out, and the establishment is basically just bending over and taking it. The problem for them is multifold. First and foremost is that this crap is absolutely insane, and it will take the party down with it. But even on just the notion of unity, the commies are not playing ball. Bernie Sanders, they're all calling out the establishment. So, these people are not going to stop until they've conquered the entire party. So, the least you can try to do is try to put up a fight, but I guess they're not even going to try to do that. So they're not trying to put up a fight. And unfortunately, the biggest loser of all, Rita, I fear will be the American people, because this is not good when one of our parties goes down the path of communism and some of the worst ideologies ever known to man.
Josh Hammer, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, Sophie Cunningham's star is on the rise. Kinsey Schofield has the details. Welcome back. Now, she may be hated by the woke WNBA owners, coaches, and some of their miserable fans, but most Americans adore Sophie Cunningham. She is real, she is brave, she's a hell of an athlete, and she loves her country. Yep, not only can she ball, stand up for women's rights, but she can also belt out the great Toby Keith's courtesy of the red, white and blue while standing on a bar. What a woman. Joining me now is host of the Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered podcast. Kinsey, let's not forget, this woman has gone through hell in recent weeks. She's been called everything from a transphobic bigot to a white supremacist for simply saying female sport, female spaces should be protected.
I know. Well, first of all, happy birthday to Sophie. It's still her birthday where I am, dirty 30. I mean, if your argument is so fragile that you have to put, Sophie on the naughty word list, because I'm reading all of the reports that Sophie is now basically banned from the WNBA subreddit. I don't think that Sophie is the problem. I mean, she's discovered the fastest way to become a rebel in 2026 is to state the obvious. Women's sports should be for women. And they keep trying to punish her. And somehow every controversy makes her more popular. At this point, her critics are basically her unpaid PR department. And maybe they should start charging her.
Absolutely. I mean, this is an 80-20, 90-10 perhaps issue. She's just saying what most people think, unless you're in the hard activist left, which seems to rule the WNBA. Now, Novak Djokovic has spoken of his bitterness at being made villain of the world by Australians who kicked him out of the country for refusing to be vaccinated during the COVID-19 era. In a documentary to be released this week, the world's most successful male tennis player said it was all political. Kinsey, I remember that time well. I wrote about it at the time. And I've got to say, I don't want to say I told you so, but I was one of the very few who was calling out the politicians and the media who were almost uniformly awful in their treatment of Djokovic. He was treated like a terrorist.
I mean, COVID turned a lot of politicians and journalists into hall monitors with unlimited power, and Djokovic became the kid who refused to ask permission to go to the bathroom. Whatever you thought of his vaccine decision, the hysteria surrounding Djokovic was completely inappropriate. He wasn't demanding everybody agree with him. He was demanding the right to make a decision about his own body. Naturally, that's a sacred decision for an athlete.
Absolutely. And he'd already had COVID. So that was part of the argument that was absolutely dismissed. The fact that he already had antibodies because he'd had the virus previously. And as we know, The vaccine didn't stop you from getting the virus or passing it on. So the treatment of this man was absolutely disgraceful. Black mark in Australia's history, but I think most of the country's memory hold that. So this documentary will be interesting. Now, Justin Trudeau has posted a summer photo dump to his Instagram, and it includes a photo with the Obamas, selfies with Katy Perry at a restaurant. Kinsey, this is a man who did such enormous damage to Canada, and now he's become some sort of an Insta-influencer doing photo dumps. I mean, is he 12? If you're a man, can I just say additionally, if you're a man, just be very careful with a photo dump. These are female areas. Women of any age, go right ahead. But if you're a man, I just think you need to rethink the Instagram strategy.
Olivia Rodrigo inspires my photo dumps, so I totally agree with you there. Like, that is so weird to me. But I do think we need to be fair. Justin Trudeau has finally found a job he's qualified for, and that's Instagram boyfriend. I mean, after years of running Canada, he moved on to something considerably more within his skill set, taking selfies. Canada got the national debt, but Katy Perry got the European vacation.
Well, you know what? You're right. Finally a job where he can do limited amount of damage. Let's hope he stays in that role. Now, reports that Prince Harry wants to visit Britain every few months following his reunion with King Charles. His meeting with his father reportedly left him very happy and really energised. Kinsey, he'll be returning in September for around a week for a series of engagements for the Invictus Games. It seems like the prodigal son is back.
Well, I like that we're staying on the theme of Instagram boyfriends here with Prince Harry, another guy with limited skills. He spent years telling us Britain was basically unbearable. Now suddenly he wants to come back every few months. It's amazing how much more attractive the royal family becomes when Hollywood stops returning your calls. I think Harry has finally realized that his royal connection is not an inconvenience to his brand. It is his brand.
It is. It'll be interesting to see if Prince William will eventually accept his olive branch, if indeed he has extended one. Now, Rosie O'Donnell has revealed that Bill Gates spent a year trying to test her for autism. Have a listen.
Do you think you're neurodivergent?
When I was first on my show, Bill Gates was doing a large study in the 90s at the University of Seattle about autism. This is back when there wasn't all that much research going on. And they would call every few months the first year and say, we really would like to test you because of my ability to recite lyrics.
I'd also like to test her for different reasons, for her TDS primarily. Kinsey, I know so much about that woman, and most of it I don't want to know.
Yeah. I mean, at this rate, Rosie's next interview is going to include her cholesterol numbers and the PIN to her debit card. I just hope you're mentally prepared, though, because she goes into hosting mode this week on Kimmel. So she's going to be giving us plenty of content. Just check yourself before you wreck yourself. But to your point, this might be one Bill Gates campaign I can get behind.
Rosie O'Donnell hosting Jimmy Kimmel. I'm going to have more content for Lefties Losing It than I can handle. I'm going to have to double the length of the show. I don't know. We're going to have to make some arrangements. Before you go, just quickly, Nicole Kidman has shocked fans with her new look. She posed for a Vogue photo shoot. Nothing like a post-divorce glow-up, Kinsey.
Yeah, somewhere Keith Urban just quietly stormed out of a grocery store after looking at Nicole's Fierce magazine cover. Her face staring back at him. Nothing motivates a woman quite like knowing her ex-husband is going to see her on the cover of Vogue. You're right. She's perfection right now.
Absolutely. Particularly if that ex-husband allegedly was having an affair with a younger woman that broke up the marriage. I mean, just some extra motivation there. If you need it, Kinsey Schofield, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time tonight. And that's all the time I have. I'll see you tomorrow night at 11. Late Edition is up next.